Thank you so much for that introduction. Tanvi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you for the introduction.
Yeah, no, it's really really exciting to be here. And Tanvi, where are you calling from today?
So yeah, I'm from Delhi. Yeah, so I'm based in Delhi. So I'm in my room, and my parents are watching it on the next room.
That's funny. Yeah, my parents are also watching next door. So
Probably morning there. So good morning.
thank you, thank you. Yeah, it's the sun is just rising, so it's I'm trying to manage with some light and hopefully some natural light will come in. So
Yeah.
it's good, it's good. So, I think, obviously they did an introduction, so we don't have to go deep into it, but just to give everyone a context around what today's session is going to be about. Obviously, it's all around mindset for excellence, and I'm sure Tanvi, mindset for you has been a really critical aspect of how you've become very successful as a professional player, right? I mean, I don't meet too many professional players, so it's really cool to be able to interact with one. But um, I know for myself, obviously at a young age, to be able to work with people that are much older than myself, a lot of it has come down to mindset. And so I definitely resonate with, I think, the topic. And I think just to first start out, it'd be really interesting to learn a little bit more about how you got into the current profession that you're in. Like, how did you become a professional squash player? Like, it'd be awesome to start there.
Yeah, for sure. So I've been playing squash since I was about 9 years old, and so my junior career in squash was up till the point that I left for college. I went to the States, and this was something that I was so passionate about. I wasn't the best at it when I started, and there were many ups and downs, and but there's something within me just made me stick to it. And over the years, I've learned so much, and I'm so fortunate that squash actually brought me to heartfulness. Later on I'll get to that. But yeah, so I basically played, and then I got recruited as part of the Columbia squash team. And once I went to college, I was kind of confused, because a lot of people, once they're there, even despite being recruited and stuff for sports, a lot of people end up, finding a job in the US and just staying there. But I don't know, there was something in me, and luckily, like, my parents were so supportive that I decided to do this professionally, and I came back about 2 years back, and I've been playing professionally ever since then. So, a little bit about my past, since this topic is about peak performance. So when I was a kid, I was very emotional. I mean, I'm a very sensitive person. And there was this whole idea of think and play. So when I was a young child and I would play and I would go into a squash match, my coaches, my parents, all the adults around that area would always say, okay, Tanvi, go in and think and play, And that whole match, be it a 20-minute match, 30-minute match, I would just end up trying to think. And coming out of the match, let's say after 20 minutes, and after having lost, I would tell myself, oh, Tanvi, today you didn't think enough,
Hmm.
And that mindset kind of never left me, I may have gotten a little mentally tougher and more positive, but this whole concept of thinking and playing, it stuck with me, And about a year back, I was meeting this aunt of mine at a family, some birthday party, and she was talking to me about meditation because she'd been a professional golfer. And at that point, I had really started introspecting a lot. And I had done a few meditations on my own. Generally, people in my generation, we like to go online and do guided meditations or use an app, and so it was very erratic. It was nothing consistent, and it was just 5 to 10 minutes. I couldn't sit longer than that. So one thing she told me, which really stuck with me, was the same way in which you practice a sport with the same discipline and time and structure, you have to do your meditation in a similar format if you want the kind of benefit that I'm sure you want out of it. So I went back, and she put me in touch with a heartfulness trainer. His name is Joshua. And at the time, I didn't know he was this famous author. And I just went to his house for a sitting. And I did 3 days in a row. I did the meditations, and each sitting was about 40 minutes, and it was just amazing sitting there with someone else and experiencing transmission for the first time. It was such a powerful experience because it just went by so fast, and those 3 days left me so decluttered. There was so much baggage that I didn't even know I had in me. And ever since then, I just knew that this is something which is so good for me, and I have to keep this up, not only in terms of sports, but in life in general. This just molds everything and shapes everything that I do. So I had an interview about on the fourth day uh, after I started Heartfulness. And I've always been a very shy public speaker. Even in college, I would email my professors and say, I can't speak. Uh, I have a fear of speaking, and can you please? I'd send you my thoughts before class. I've always found a way out. Yeah. So interviews terrified me, and it was just surreal because I went for that interview and I just spoke. I just was in such a flow, and I actually didn't want it to end, and I just spoke for 15 minutes, and that was my first experience actually doing something from your heart versus actually thinking and all. Things started to flow from there, and yeah, that's what really kind of, it just like shook me, and I really felt the power of this sort of practice. And yeah, I've been doing it ever since then, and it's going to be a year now.
That's awesome. That's really interesting. I'm curious about one thing that you said around overthinking, right? Because I think many of the people on this live, right, they've obviously experienced overthinking. I know I've experienced overthinking. It sounds like you have as well. Talk to me a little bit about, where did overthinking start for you when you were on the squash court? And similarly, what have been some of the tools or techniques? Of course, heartfulness sounds like one of them, but are there other things that you've done to kind of aid at that overthinking nature that you've had on the squash court, as well as I'm sure off the squash court as well?
Yeah, so I read this really amazing book once. It's called The Untethered Soul.
Yeah,
And
that's a great book.
yeah, it's an amazing book.
Yeah.
And so the first chapter, as you know, it kind of talks about the voice inside your head.
Yeah.
And it really explains it really beautifully about how there's this constant chatter in your head, and it shows you how there'll be many different voices. So for me to say that, oh, okay, this one voice is Tanvi, but this other voice is not Tanvi, that's incorrect, because there's so many of them. To identify with one of them is giving them power over you. And it kind of shows you how to just start observing those thoughts around you, and kind of just not identifying with them, right? So actually, even before Heartfulness, I'd started introspecting a lot about different ways of identifying with limiting beliefs and such and such. Another thing I found was, every time I would play a tournament, just moments prior to, like, half an hour before my match, there would, even despite being in a really positive frame of mind, there'll always be that one thought creeping in and coming in saying, oh, you're gonna fail. And one fun way for me to deal with that was I just gave it a horrible, really funny name. And in Hindi, I just called it Bittu or something. And it would just be like, shut up, Bittu, every time it came. So I didn't give it that power over me. But upon starting like Heartfulness, I, like when you're playing a match, and this happens to me a lot, I'm playing a match and I'm playing really well. And I come out and my coaches are like, damn good, you're like doing a really good job. And then I'll go into the third game, and then suddenly like I'll lose like a lot of points in a row. And you know what? Heartfulness made me aware of that feeling of tightness that comes in at that moment. And it took me some time, to kind of realize that feeling of, tension and fear. And it's so obvious that when you're feeling those emotions, how can you do anything logically? How can you hit the right shot? And so many people are unaware. Like at that moment, they try to reinforce positivity through thoughts and stuff like that. But, actually going within and trying to, feel what you're feeling, and using feelings as a way to kind of maneuver your way. That's what I realized.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And one thing you also touched upon that I want to extract a little bit more is around, listening to that inner voice in your head, the negative inner voice, I should say,
Yeah.
versus listening to the inner voice within your heart, right? And when you started meditation, and the cool thing is a lot of the things that I think you probably use on a more practical basis are things we're going to experience today. So right after this session, um, right after our discussion, I should say, we're going to do a guided cleaning. And I think to your point about baggage and kind of helping remove some of that unwanted thoughts and like just your that nature that we might have, that natural nature. Those are some of the benefits of some of these practices that we're going to be discussing. But I'm curious, how did you shift between listening to your head versus listening to your heart? Like what was kind of that transition that took place?
Yeah, actually, it's even I'm thinking about this particular concept of like baggage and guilt. So, you know, I don't know when it happened, but it's interesting to think of, how over the past 15 years or 20 years, or I'm 23 right now, and over the past 23 years, I've had so many experiences as we all do. And, throughout your life, people will say things to you, and you yourself will develop opinions about yourself, right? And I never ever questioned the fact that these things and assumptions I had about myself were actually just thoughts and words that had come to me. So I
Yeah.
had, over the course of my life, I had put these definite labels of me on me, whether it is in terms of squash or outside of squash or just my character in general. And what started to happen was, like people would give me feedback and criticism, and I wouldn't take it the best way because I was close to it, because it was emotional for me. I would, anything someone said to me, I took it personally as something that was attached to me. So if someone, uh, like my coach comes and tells me that, oh, this part of your game needs a lot of work, it wasn't just a statement in isolation. It was this whole, accusation that he like gave to me. So what actually happened is, once you start meditating and I kind of started sensing my own rigidity, like when someone gives me feedback and I noticed that tightness in my heart, it kind of helped me go inwards um, and focus more on what I'm feeling from within versus what's happening in my environment around me. So it kind of showed me that all these things exist within you, and you can't blame the outside environment. And these are your own beliefs. No one is accusing you of anything. This is something that you think of yourself. And actually, once you let go of that,
Yeah.
there's a whole world out there for you to experiment. And that really helped my game, because now when my coach gives me feedback, it's almost as though I look forward to it, because it's an experiment, it's a challenge. It's no more that I have this limiting belief in myself that, okay, like I'm going to struggle at this, I'm a slow learner. Like all that is gone. The language aspect of it is gone. It's just that he's told me to do this, and I'm a human being like anyone else. I have two hands, two legs. What should stop me? The only thing that stops you is up here. So that was a big change for me, because for a large part of my life I had this guilt and low self-concept, and I really carried it with me for a long time. And I never knew that and what's amazing is that when you start meditating, it's not that I'm actively working on these things. Over the course of time, it just starts happening on its own.
Yeah. It's almost like it gets self-corrected.
Yeah. So in college, I started reading a lot of literature. I got really interested in introspection, and I felt this restlessness. I felt this void in me. And something kind of just pushed me to begin that journey. But it's amazing how different it is when you meditate, because everything you read, you suddenly start imbibing it in just like in a matter of seconds, without that thought into it. So yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting as well. What about in terms of your impact that I think things like overthinking have had off the or on the court as well. So was it that for you going onto the court you would think a lot about failure, or was it placement of shots, or was it what the other opponent was thinking, or like what kind of got you away from that? And obviously, I
I think
mean,
yeah.
you continue to do well, so there's some benefit that's going on. So I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I think it's just that just I'm quite like hardworking. So, when I feel like, I put in so much hard work, and then you have that fear that, everything you've done is now just, it's not going to add up, you have,
Yeah.
so that's one worry you have. But then also it's this whole concept of recognition. So when you're playing in practice, there's no one watching. So there's
Yeah.
no pressure. And, and suddenly, I mean, you think that, like most of the audience that watches you most of the time, they've not played squash, but still, just like when someone comes and watches you play, like that entire dynamic changes. So I think for me, a large part of growing was just getting over that, just trying to play for myself versus focusing on what's going on outside of the court.
Yeah.
This kind of you can take this example outside in the context of relationships, and how a lot of us, we do a lot of things just for that recognition. And I mean, human relationships are so important. It's so important to give and take and share love. But when you stop craving that validation, I feel like it makes a big change, and it gives you so much self-assurance, because you feel so happy when you're actually the one giving yourself that validation.
Right. Right. No, that makes sense. What about, a lot of the people on the webinar today, right? Some of them are practicing meditation, some of them are interested in meditation. There are probably some people that have nothing to do with meditation. They just want to hear a squash player talk
Yeah.
about their experiences. But uh, what would you say to people, in that moment that your aunt asked you to try meditation, this is going to help you? Um, was there any doubt around practicing it? Or obviously there are many squash players who are highly successful, and not just in squash, but in every realm of life, who practice, have a self practice, and then many who probably don't have a self practice. So was there any sense of hesitancy or skepticism? And what would you kind of say for folks that experience that? Because I know, for example, for myself, I've been practicing Heartfulness for 7 years now. So I'm 24, so I'm it's been an interesting journey through, I think, like critical periods of life, all the way from high school till past college, of where a meditation practice has been a part of my day-to-day routine. And for me, I see, obviously now as a trainer, a lot of different types of folks coming, and their wants and needs and their inhibitions towards a meditation practice. But I'm curious if you had any kind of hesitancies around that as well.
Mm, mm.
Or did
I,
you just say, listen, my aunt knows what she's talking about, I'm just going
yeah.
to do it?
No, because she was speaking from experience. When you
Yeah.
talk to people, and when you talk to people who actually like walk the way, it
Yeah.
makes a difference. She was a living, breathing example of someone who practices heartfulness. And similarly, like when I go for sittings with trainers, there's this lady I go to in Delhi, Suparna, and I also go to Joshua. There's something about their essence. When I see them and I talk to them, and
Yeah.
when you have someone in close contact who is doing all the things you aspire to be and to do, it really helps, because
Sure.
it rubs off on you, and you actually you see them and you're like, if they can do it, why not me? And that really pushed me. I also come from a family which is uh, a lot of people are involved in heartfulness, so that pushed me. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. And similarly here, right? The reason I got into meditation is because my parents have been practicing meditation for a long time. And so I think having those examples and kind of seeing it to believe it, at least for me, has been really critical, because naturally I would say I was a pretty skeptical person, or I always question, why would somebody do what they're doing? But it's very different, as to your point, as when you see like living examples of where you want to be in the
Yeah.
future in different realms of life, right? So of course spiritually, but materially, and what, like you were saying, regarding relationships. And I almost felt like the people that I saw that were practicing like this meditation as well as other meditations, they had something unique about their essence, to your point. And that kind of led to you know the way that they behaved and their approach. So that makes total sense. What about, I mean, for you, from here on out, I mean, what have you kind of changed in your routine? Or like, obviously a lot of mindset and excellency comes down to consistency, I found.
Mhm.
So what has been big for you, from college and then now what have you focused on, or like what has been like some of the things that you do on a day-to-day basis?
In terms of meditation, or
Meditation, but also how have you one incorporated meditation, but also like what has day-to-day routine been like for you to maintain that consistency
yeah,
to achieve excellence?
it's not easy because you're training for like 6 7 hours a day. So sometimes like I want to sleep in more, and
Yeah.
then I have to like rush to squash. So then I have like a very small window to meditate, and like, but the days I don't do it, I feel really different. So it's like I find time to do it. And so the morning meditation is something I do, and then in the evening I do cleaning. So after I come home, usually, if I'm having an evening session after training, which is like the physical work, I'm already really tired, and there's so many impressions in my head, and there's so many emotions. So to be fresh for the next session, I make sure I do some cleaning before, and also afterwards a little bit, because you're coming home to like family, and there's
Yeah.
this little a bit of entitlement that comes. You worked for like 7 8 hours, you've been slogging, and you come home, and someone says something to you, and you just snap at them.
Yeah.
You're like, I deserve like to be treated properly. So to just get rid of that entitlement, I'll meditate so that I'm a decent human being before. Yeah.
Got it. And what about like your daily routine? Like, do you do anything in the morning, like when you wake up? Do you, I don't know, do you have affirmations and then you practice meditation? Or, different people obviously practice different things. Like
Yeah.
I get up every morning and I drink a cup of coffee. Like for me, like that's what I need to kind of kickstart the
Yeah.
day, and then I'll set for meditation. So I'm,
I,
I'm curious if there's
uh,
anything like
I just have a bath, and then like I meditate. But there's something I've been trying out called, everyone has been talking about it. It's called the Wim Hof Method.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, so I've become a big fan of that. So I've been doing that after meditating. And
Why don't you tell people about that? Because I've only seen videos of people like Lewis Howes like do the Wim Hof method.
I'm pretty new
But
to it. Yeah, but basically you do 30 breaths. And on the 30th breath is when you kind of hold your breath, and you just see how long you can go. And you do 4 rounds of that. And basically it's been the adrenaline that is produced in your body has been compared to like when someone goes bungee jumping. But the benefits of doing this is like this is stuff that I've just read, so I can't preach it.
sure.
But Wim talks about how your body kind of turns from an acidic state to more alkaline, and basically it's for your immunity and also for your general well-being and happiness. And yeah, so I've
Is
just
there's an element of like cold plunge or something like that, right?
there's that the cold shower, but I haven't gone around to do that because
That's funny. That's funny. Awesome. Well, I think we have, about 3 minutes left before we jump into Q&A, but
yeah.
where from here out do you kind of see meditation shaping your life? Or like obviously you've been practicing for a year now and it sounds like it's
So
been great, but
yeah, so I started about a year back, and then within months, like my all my family members also started. So we become a house full of
right.
meditation classes, and a lot of people I know have actually been open to it, and they've accepted it. And something I find is that when like you do it with your loved ones, it just changes the atmosphere at home. Everyone
Sure.
is so much more open to each other, and you like problems that have been in your family for a long time with each one of us. Things just start sliding, and it really becomes a much lovelier place to be in. Now, with my personal journey with meditation, I don't know. I just feel like in the past 1 year, there's so much that's happened, like so many changes that, I'm so grateful for everything that's happened that I honestly, I'm so happy with even the rate at which I don't want to change anything. I'm just on this path and I want to keep going.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
I
pretty
love
pretty
it.
amazing. Awesome. Great. Well, I think, why don't we open up to, some Q&A. I
Yeah.
think it'd be great to hear from other folks that have questions about, you know, whatever they want to ask that's relevant. So I don't know how we want to facilitate that. Okay, great. So I think they're working on Q&A. Perfect. What have you kind of been doing for training now that we're in quarantine, we're at home? Like how has also meditation impacted you in that sense as well?
Yeah. So, uh, most people, like most athletes I know, they're dying to get back on court, and even I am. But it's just nice to have this time to to myself, and to spend it with my family. And in India we have like a lot of staff at home with us, and people like who cook and like clean and stuff like that. So it's really nice to spend time with them, because they are our family, and it's amazing just sharing a space together and getting to know more about each other. So I've just been doing that, and I've been doing my online fitness every day with my fitness trainer, and so I've been keeping that up. But other than just training for an hour a day, not much else. Just been playing a lot of board games and just having relaxing.
Got it. Awesome. So I think we have a couple of questions that have come in, but I think to start off with, one question we have here is, what advice would you give to the youth? Uh, you could craft that the way you want about what advice would you give the youth about, I don't know, mindset or uh, meditation. So I'll kind of let you kind of take that the way you'd like.
Um, if you're inquisitive and you're on this path where you like to introspect, and you feel like there's something more that I could be doing, you definitely should try meditation, and especially the heartfulness way. And just otherwise be open, because there's so many things out there for you to try at this stage in your life, and there's so much time as well. So don't have rigid beliefs about anything. Something I'm working on. So yeah.
Yeah.
What about you? How would you answer that?
Yeah, I think just openness is so critical, right? I think many times we want to create or we want to control a situation, whether it's, with regards to career or jobs or relationships or, quarantine as an example. Like there's so many times as humans, like we want to create or control the situation.
Yeah.
And I think it's best to trust the process, as hard as that might sound. I
Mm.
think it's best to trust the process and understand that you if you put forth your efforts, I think things naturally, and you're in unison, I think, with what you believe. I think things naturally come. So I
Yeah.
think that's probably the thing I wish I knew maybe 5, 6 years ago, or I should say I continually work on. So that's one. Then another one here we have, which I think is actually very interesting, is around like loss, right? So not loss in terms of family member, but loss in terms of experiencing failure, right? So the question is around, have you experienced a severe streak of losses or failures, and talk to us a little bit about resiliency or like how you've come back from them.
Yeah. So I like I mentioned earlier, I'm very sensitive. So uh, just generally when I was younger, I would get very emotional after losing, and despite it happening again and again. But over the past year, at least, what I'm finding is that I'm becoming better at dealing with it, because once you have like you have this faith in something bigger than you almost.
Yeah.
Um, you I don't know, it just takes care of that. Like I met Daji once, and I asked him about dealing with loss, and he said it's so important that when you win and when you lose, you're at that state of equilibrium. You shouldn't go
Yeah,
up or two down. And hearing that from him, it really, really stuck with me, and it helped me a lot because it was just the answer I wanted. Because I never appreciated the heaviness I felt after losing, and it didn't feel right because there's so many outside factors that come into how you perform, and every individual tries their best, and maybe at that point that was my best. Maybe my mental capacity or my physical capacity wasn't just good enough, and that's why I lost, right? So you have to be kinder to yourself, definitely, because a lot of stuff is going to happen in your environment, and the only thing you can control is how you kind of respond to it.
totally,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah, I couldn't agree. I mean, if kind of goes back to that point about openness, right? Is that in many times losses might be opportunities for success in the future, but there's a
Exactly.
critical lesson or there's a critical juncture that you're trying to learn as a result. So, uh, yeah, I totally resonate with that. And I think another point that you brought up that's really interesting is around like, I almost think of it as lessening the blows on both ends. So like the highs, being kind of in that state of equilibrium as Daji talks about, right? So, the highs not being as high and the lows not being as low. So staying
Yeah.
kind of in that state of,
Yeah, I guess close to that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's interesting. And then there's another one that there's a couple more actually that have come in. Um, how could we get motivation to beat procrastination, and focus on goals and just become better? So I think it's actually very apt. Like, you talked about there are some days when you wake up and like you're tired and like you want to go back to
Yeah.
sleep, right? Like everyone experiences that. So like, what motivates you, or how do you
So,
beat that?
once you start, this is something I'm talking about with experience.
Yeah,
Once you start meditating, you become so mindful. You start witnessing how you're feeling from within, right? So anytime you're doing something where you start procrastinating, and you get that answer immediately because there'll be a tightness that follows. Whereas when you do something that you actually enjoy and love, and you could be procrastinating and doing something you love, that's fine. But when you're doing something that's not adding or contributing to your life at all, you always know. So
yeah,
I think it's just about listening to that voice inside of you, like not the one in your head, but the one in your heart. And the more and more you start paying attention to that, you'll start following it uh, because that rest, you just want to escape that restlessness in your heart.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
And what about for you, right? Like, what do you just, to be more applicable, right, for folks that might be wondering, if you are procrastinating, is that something that innately comes to fruition for you? Like, does that come to the top because you're more tuned with your heart and your heart is saying that, hey, you need to stop procrastinating? Like, is that how it works, or is there something else?
No, it's like, yeah, it's not so much that I use the word like procrastinating. I'll be like, you're just doing something for the sake of it, and this is a moment where like habit kicks in, and you actually have no control over what you're doing. You're just staring at the TV, or you're, I don't know, on your phone, on Instagram, and it does come to my mind, and sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes you just want to do it, and you're like, I don't care, I just want to watch TV. But over time, you start feeling so good when you're doing other stuff, that you don't feel the need to do so much of the bad stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I almost feel like, for me at least, resisting doing something
Yeah.
actually ends up me wanting to do it more.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
Yeah.
right. And I think through this process too, like, we're going to learn a technique called cleaning, right? And doing something like cleaning for a few minutes, uh, before I want to go do that activity, right, whatever that might be, I think is really beneficial. Like, it can be, as simple as, going for a run versus like staying home, right? And like, it just gives you a chance to rechannel your thought process, and
Mm-hmm.
just like recalibrate or like go to that state of equilibrium,
Yeah.
again, to have like a fresh state of mind even before making decisions, right? So it's
So yeah.
that's interesting. So a couple of more here. Um, how do you deal with temptations? Like, don't you feel like you're missing out on fun that people are having when they're 23? Like, obviously in college, like being a student athlete,
Yeah.
there's probably a lot of pressure there to like
No, so
do
I did.
well. Yeah,
Yeah. So I did it till it was fun, you know. I didn't, like you said, I didn't try to stop myself. I recently became vegetarian like 6 months back. It's not that I planned it. It just happened, you know.
yeah,
So it's like I used to love going out and meeting my friends and partying a lot. And you know, over time, it just didn't have that same effect for me. I still love meeting my friends, but maybe in a different setting, you know? So I wouldn't say stop yourself from doing things, you know, when they no longer resonate with who you are as a person, then the shift will automatically come. You don't have to try and make these, you know, rigid changes. You should just do where your heart guides you, basically.
yeah, makes sense. What do you do to prepare yourself before you go into a match?
Yeah, so get a good night's sleep the day before the match. Wake up in the morning, sometimes early for a hit. So I'll go and hit at the squash court. Then I'll come back and maybe do I'll meditate for sure, like 3 4 hours before the match, or maybe 2 hours before my match. And um, just you know, on the way there, just think of like some of the stuff I discussed with my coach and get my warm up in. But I don't like to watch too many people playing, you know, because that usually matches happening in before you get on. So I find that when you start focusing and watching other people play, the thinking part of your brain gets active again. And so I just try to avoid that and just try to be by myself, you know. Yeah. I think being
Yeah,
by myself is an important one. Just try to,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And one more question, I think, then we'll jump into the guided cleaning. Um, so how do you maintain a balance between sports and, education?
Between sports and education. Um, so I went to college. To be honest, I went to college with no interest in studying at all. I'd just been playing squash, and I don't know how I got into Columbia, but I did. And I don't mean to sound rude, but my education didn't kind of prepare me for what was in store for me. So that first year was a real struggle. And but you know, luckily we at my school taught me how to like figure a way out. So I was quick to adapt. And you know, it just happened that I was in this class with this one professor, and she had such an impact on me. Just you know, like you said, you know, when there's a person with a certain essence and it just rubs off on you. And ever since then, you know, I was so interested in academics. And so it was not so much, you know, a need to balance squash and education. It just, my love for like studying and learning, it just came out of love, you know. It was not something I imposed on myself. So I feel like you should pursue what you love. And, you know, as long as you have a mentality where you're trying to learn in every little aspect of your life, like that's education enough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's very well said. It's like the traditional go to school and read from a textbook and listen to your professor. Like that is a part of education. But to your point, I think self-education is such a critical aspect of continuation, like lifelong learning, right? Like that never stops,
Yeah.
whether you're an athlete or not, probably.
Yeah, I had a question for you actually. How did you decide? Like, when did you decide you're going to become a trainer? Because you're quite young. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me it was more around I was practicing, meditation, and there was just, I think, just natural inclination to then take this and teach it to more folks, right? And so, there was a selection process involved and like a training process too. But it's been interesting to be able to see people that are our age and kind of guide them through this meditation practice. And um, I think it helps, right? Because you have your meditation practice, but then you're also, you know, giving sessions and working with people who are just learning for the first time, right? And it's like a lot of the things that you're saying, right? In many ways, like I remember when I was taking my first sittings and I was highly skeptical, right?
Yeah.
Of like, what is this, you know? And but now it's something that I can't live without, which is so. It goes back to our point about openness, right? Like, who would have known that this would have been something that would have been so critical? And it's almost weaved and played into so many different aspects of life. So, I've been a trainer now for the last 5 years or so, 4 years, 5 years, something like that. So it's been good. Yeah. So cool. Well, Tanvi, any last things before we jump into the guided cleaning, and then we'll jump into meditation?
Oh, I think we should just start.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, so maybe I'll give a little bit of context around the guided cleaning, for everyone here. So, as Tanvi alluded to, we have many times at the end of the day, we're carrying on a lot of complexities and impurities, and just thoughts that carry on through the day, baggage you could call them, right? So the cleaning process is typically done in the evenings, but to our point, it can be done really at any point in which you feel like you need to kind of reset. And so this is a really handy tool within your toolkit of meditation to allow you to kind of uh, recalibrate, right? And it's an active process, whereas meditation, which we're going to do which we're going to do after, is a little bit more of a passive process. So, what we're going to do, and I'll take you through the guided cleaning, but what you'll want to do is close your eyes and basically give the suggestion that all the impurities and complexities are leaving your system from the back, basically from your head to the bottom of your tailbone, so all the way out from the back. And you can either envision smoke or mist, for example, leaving your back, whichever you feel comfortable with. And it's an active process, so you don't need to think about specific things. However, you should feel that process kind of happening. Versus the meditation, which we'll do after, is a little bit more subtle. So I'll walk you guys through what this will look like, and we'll do this for 10 minutes or so, and then I'll kind of guide you back into the guided relaxation, and we'll do the meditation from there, if that works. Sounds good?
Yeah. Ready?
Sit comfortably and close your eyes very softly and very gently. Through this guided cleaning, we're going to be giving the suggestion that all the complexities and impurities are leaving your system from the back. We're going to start with the top of the head. And give the suggestion that the complexities and impurities are leaving your system out the back. From the top of your head, all the way down to your shoulders, to the bottom of your spine. That's all. How do you feel?
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just find like a few minutes of cleaning just totally changes the
Yeah.
environment, which is interesting.
Exactly that. Yeah. You know, uh, I'm I'm not like that okay yet with cameras and public speaking and stuff. So it was my first time meditating on camera. But even on opening my eyes, it had the same exact feeling that it does when I do it by myself. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the cleaning process as a whole is such a critical aspect, I think, of obviously heartfulness, but for me, like day-to-day life as a part of lifestyle, because to my earlier point, it allows you to kind of reset your.
So how often do you do it?
So I do it once, usually sometimes twice if I need it, but usually once a day in the evenings.
Okay.
So the the prescribed protocol, you could call it, is to do it once in the evening after your day's work is over. So for me, by around 8:30 is when I usually wind up for the day, at least work-wise,
Yeah.
and that's when I do the cleaning. So, as you were saying, or before you actually interact with family, so you're not snappy. That's that's a good way to do it. So for me, it's like before dinner. I find that that's like a good way to reset and then go into eat dinner. So it's uh, yeah, yeah,
Are
yeah. And
we
I think
doing are we doing
go ahead.
another meditation, or are we doing some more cleaning?
No, so we're gonna do a meditation, but the way I think of meditation and cleaning kind of intersecting with one another is, and one of the guides, Chariji, explained it this way that, you know, every morning, let's say you were to go get water from the well, or I think he says milk, um, and you need to pour milk into a cup, or he talks about like taking a mug and taking milk, for example. Every single time you take milk in the morning, you need to wash the cup in the evening, or you need to wash the cup afterwards. Otherwise, the
Yeah.
next day that you take it, maybe for a few days, it'll be okay. But eventually, you'll come to the point in which the mug will start to get stains and then it'll start to mold potentially, right? And it just starts to wear. And it's very similar in meditation because, or in this practice, because you have the morning meditation, which is all focused around divine light in the heart. It's a little bit more passive, um, and it's a very subtle suggestion that you're using to then see kind of where that takes you. Versus with the cleaning, right, in the evening, it kind of it's this balance that you need to, I think everyone needs to undergo, which is why it's a part of this practice. Um, that allows you to the earlier point around removal of these like impressions and these complexities. And it fits so beautifully well with the morning meditation, which is all about taking in versus the cleaning is about taking out. So
So,
that's
yeah, sorry to interrupt you, but just like when I used to describe cleaning to my friends, I would tell them, it's like, how you feel fresh when you wake up in the morning. So cleaning is like waking up again. It's like having two mornings in the same day.
that's good. Yeah, and a question that I used to have and I used to get is, well, how do I know that I'm not, and especially I think with meditation, with cleaning, it's a little bit more active, so you're alert. The whole point is to be alert. You shouldn't be, but with meditation, the question becomes, how do I know I'm meditating versus I'm sleeping? And we'll experience meditation right after this. And uh, it's hard to say, but I think the easiest thing to point your finger on is, or put your finger on is, after you wake up, you usually feel pretty groggy, right? Versus after meditation, after you come out of meditation, sometimes you can get into those very deep states and like you feel very good afterwards. But after you come out of those meditations, you feel very refreshed, to your
Yeah,
point,
exactly.
right? And
Yeah,
it yeah,
yeah, I know
yeah.
what you mean. Yeah, a lot of people ask me also, every time I meditate, I fall asleep. Is that good or bad? But yeah, you've given me a good answer.
Yeah, because then you kind of you can differentiate, because sometimes of course you get into such deep states of meditations that honestly, like, sometimes you'll fall asleep, and that's the whole purpose around doing meditation when you're alert, though, right? But it should be something that is very natural, versus with the cleaning process, it's something that is highly you kind of need to be active. It's an active process versus meditation, which is passive. So I think, and Tanvi, you spoke a little bit about this around pranahuti, right? And I think why heartfulness is so different from other practices is because it's utilizing this yogic energy, right? And during this meditation, what we're going to be doing is I'll take you guys through a relaxation, and we'll sit for about 20 minutes. And um, to put it simply, and Tanvi, you started about a year ago, so if you have some words of wisdom for folks that are trying it for the first time, feel free to share. But what we'll do is, after the relaxation takes place, um, what you want to do is bring your attention to your heart and give the suggestion that divine light is present within your heart, right? Or light is present within your heart, and it's pulling you inwards. Um, and there's not really much to really explain beyond that, other than experiencing what that feels like. And I think, after, for me at least, I remember I had a lot of questions around what does that even mean. And I think just giving that suggestion and then being open to what you're going to be experiencing is the best way that I found in
Yeah,
explaining what that transition looks like.
yeah, 100%. Just being open to it.
Yeah, and one of the guides in Heartfulness, Babuji, he talks about light, divine light within the heart, as light without luminosity. So you're not imagining a physical light, or you're not trying to close your eyes so tight that you see light. But I remember I did that during my first session. But uh, the key, I think, is to just give that suggestion and then just stay present within your heart, right? And I think that kind of will take you to over time. I think it takes you to unique places, which is the really the best way I can explain it.
Yeah,
Yeah. So we'll do the relaxation, and then we'll go into meditation, and we'll sit for 20 minutes, and then we'll wrap up from there.
cool.
Sit comfortably and close your eyes very softly and very gently. Let's begin with the toes. Wiggle them if necessary, and feel the energy from the earth moving up through your toes, allowing them to deeply relax. Now let's let this energy flow up through your toes, into your ankles, and allow this energy to flow up through your knees, all the way up to your lower back. Your legs are deeply relaxed now. Now bring your attention to your lower back. And allow this energy to move up through your lower back, to the middle of your back, extending up to your upper back and out through your shoulders. Now let this energy flow from your shoulders all the way out to your elbows. Let it extend out through your forearms, all the way to the tips of your fingers, allowing your arms to deeply relax. Now let's bring attention to your neck. And allow this energy to flow up through your neck, through your mouth, your nose, your eyes, your forehead, all the way to the top of your head. Now do a quick scan and make sure that no part of your body is left. And focus on untying it if necessary. Your entire body is now deeply relaxed. Now let's bring our attention to our hearts and give a suggestion that light is present within and is pulling us inward. And we'll stay there until I say that's all. Please start meditation. That's all. How do you feel?
Yeah, thanks for that. It was amazing. I want to talk a little bit about what one is supposed to do, like right after the meditation, like how you're supposed to immerse yourself in this for a
Yeah.
second.
Yeah. So after the meditation, it's best to, after the meditation has ended, to keep your eyes closed and kind of introspect what has happened, and then afterwards, if you have a notebook or a diary next to you, you can use that as a tool to kind of keep track of your observances that you've had, during each meditation. And in the beginning, it may sound trivial, but by keeping track of this, you're able to kind of compare and contrast, um, not only the different meditations you've had, but your experiences that you've had, but uh, what you're seeing in these meditations as well, and like how it's affecting you, and some of those things. So keeping a diary for those purposes, I think, has been really critical.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, awesome. So I think that's all for today. So thank you so much, Tanvi, and for the organizers for putting this together. This was a lot of fun.
No, for sure. And I hope someone somewhere got to learn something and took something from this.
Yeah, yeah, me too, me too.